The following are considered some of the most horrifying crocodile attacks on record. These true stories include the tragic case of a man who was snatched from his kayak by a massive Nile crocodile, the devastating story of a man who fell from a cliff straight into crocodile-infested waters, and much more. Like and subscribe if you're new. You're watching When Crocs Attack.
We've had a terrible accident here. Hendrik just got taken by a crocodile.
Damn it. Oh, Hendrik.
Crocodile. Crocodile.
I needed to walk through a minefield to feel protected. These words, written by Hendrik Coetzee, offer a bit of insight into how he ended up at the center of a tragedy on one of the most dangerous rivers in the world. The Congo River in the Congo is an untamed, wild place. Man-eating crocodiles lurk beneath the depths of the murky water, hostile hippos charge boats, and help, if the unthinkable happens, is hundreds of miles away. But some people are driven towards danger and exploration, and for Hendrik, close calls with death seems to be the only way that he ever felt alive. Born in the small village of Ottesdale in South Africa, Hendrik, who went by Henry, had an early life rife with conflict. His father fought in the South African border wars. Many nights, Hendrik was forced to hide under his bed as artillery rocked the house that his family was stationed in. Perhaps this early exposure to risk is what made his path more daring than most. As soon as he was grown, he took to exploring Africa and developed a fierce love of kayaking the largely unexplored rivers of the central rainforests. He went on to build a name for himself as one of the most experienced whitewater experts in the remote, untouched parts of Africa, and even led historic trips along the Nile with ease.
I would put Hendrik up there not only with the greatest kayakers of all time, but the greatest explorers of all time, people that you only read about in books.
But by late 2009, his daring exploits were starting to slow down due to a budding relationship that forced him to reflect on his mental health. Based on emails to his friends and partner, it seems that he came to realize that he craved these death-defying adventures because undertaking them was the only time that he felt sane. In between expeditions, he was tormented by periods of depression where he felt like his life seemed like a compromise not worth making. In one email to his lover, he wrote, "I would be lying if I said I have never thought of taking my own life. I do not fear death. I don't think I'll ever take my life in any conventional way. Going on an expedition never to come back is, however, another matter." The allure of going on one of those expeditions and never returning began to dissipate in 2010. Hendrik had his mind set on opening a tubing business and growing old somewhere peaceful with his partner by his side. Then in July, he received an email. The subject line read, "Congo 2. The email was from Ben Stooksbury, a 32-year-old American kayaker who wanted to embark on an unheard-of journey through largely unexplored tributaries of the Congo River. Joined by fellow kayaker Chris Corbulic, their goal was to document undeveloped communities and unmapped whitewater areas. But to do that, they needed Hendrik's expertise. At first, Hendrik declined, but it wasn't long into a conversation where he was helping the pair plan out their trip that his intense desire to go on one last expedition would arise, a feeling that he could not ignore. So he signed on, and the three decided to embark on the adventure of a lifetime.
To the district village.
Of course, it wasn't just excitement they were feeling.
So this is the start of the supermarket. It's very narrow, the water's flowing slowly, lots of rocks for crocs to rake on. I don't think I've ever gone through here without a charge.
So the supermarket is where the crocs hang out in order to feed. You're the food in their supermarket.
The dangers weren't lost on the trio.
Nile crocodiles are huge. They can be up to 20 feet long, and they'll hunt you.
There was a lot of talk about risk, from having clean water all the way to dangerous wildlife in the river.
Saying the wildlife in this region's rivers is dangerous is an understatement. It's estimated that crocodiles kill somewhere between 300 to 1,000 people in Africa each year. Though of course, due to unreliable census numbers, and not to mention the sheer amount of rural villages, it's likely that that number is even higher. These prehistoric ambush predators often lurk in calm, still water, waiting for the right moment to strike. Because they can be up to 20 feet long, they can take down prey as large as buffalo with ease. They're made of pure muscle, allowing them to shoot themselves out of the water up to the full length of their body. As you can imagine, this makes kayaking only a few inches above the water a huge hazard. However, that didn't deter Hendry, Chris, or Ben, who felt equipped for the expedition.
When Ben was given the rare chance to go, he prepared for the worst case scenarios. But how do you prepare yourself for the loss of a close friend?
Be coming out, just going across there.
Well, the thing is, nobody's told us that we can't do it.
With Hendry as their guide, the trio began their 2-month-long expedition. Their starting point was Uganda, where they'd paddle through the White Nile in Murchison Falls National Park. Then, their journey would take them to a more turbulent region along the Ruzizi River, which marks the border between the Democratic Republic of Congo and Rwanda, where decades of bloody battles have only added to the danger of a region that's also full of apex predators. Eventually, they'd end up in the Lukuga River, where they'd press on for another 700 miles before reaching the end of their journey. Unfortunately, things didn't go as planned for the trio. It was in Murchison Falls that the group was particularly careful due to it having the reputation of harboring especially volatile crocodiles.
We were much more likely to see a crocodile in a very, very flat river with no current.
Most rivers, when you get to a calm section, you can rest a little bit. But on Murch, that calm, flat water is definitely more terrifying than any of the whitewater.
Little did they know that it was the Lukuga River where the real danger awaited them. After over a decade of war along the river, the crocodiles within it had developed a predilection for human flesh. Of the 5.4 million people killed in the war, countless thousands were dumped in the water, making us a natural, common food source for crocodiles beneath the surface. But when they entered the Lukuga River on December 5th, they were greeted with signs that things were much more dangerous than they had previously thought. When the trio spoke to villagers in Niemba, asking what the humanitarian organization or the International Rescue Committee could help them with, they had 3 answers. First, they needed clean water. The second is that they needed educational access. And lastly, they needed help with the crocodiles. A local disclosed that over the past 20 years, he knew of 125 different people who had been snatched by crocodiles when they were doing things as simple as fetching water. The trio logged the information and carried on with Hendry reiterating their protocol, reminding Ben and Chris that they needed to stick together, pay close attention to the banks, and above all, absolutely not panic. Even with this news and all the warnings, the trio continued on in high spirits.
It's gorgeous out right now. Jeez.
Doesn't adjust.
Everything's gone great. Had a beautiful time. I think everyone's super stoked we took the chance, but hopefully we walk away from this just good memories. And remember kids, don't cross international borders at home.
But on December 7th, everything changed. Rain fell over the group as they paddled down the Lukuga. After seeing several crocodiles slip into the water, the kayakers clustered together in a narrow channel approximately 200 feet wide. They were paddling so close together that they had to alternate their strokes so they wouldn't accidentally hit their paddles or each other. And yet, that didn't deter the crocodile. Out of the corner of his eye, Chris saw a flicker of motion and heard 3 words from Hendry. "Oh my God." A direct quote from Hendry, which Chris has stated wasn't a scream nor a desperate cry. It was in a way a weird statement of fact. When he turned fully, Chris would see a massive crocodile latch on to Hendry, the biggest that the 3 men had seen the entire journey. The moment he caught a glimpse of the sheer size of the croc, Chris would lose all hope that his friend would survive.
God damn it. Oh. Damn it. Oh, Henry.
We've had a terrible accident here. Henry just got taken by a crocodile. The crocodile took him right out of his boat.
Hey, no, wait, just wait. No, I saw this whole thing happen.
You saw it come out of the
water. It was big.
I mean, his head was half the size of that kayak.
It was massive.
We got him by the shoulder.
Yeah, it was just like, it was right up there.
Watching Hendry's boat float down without him in it was the first time I had ever felt loss.
Inside the kayak, absolutely nothing was disturbed. All of Hendry's belongings were exactly as he had left them, and according to Ben, it was as if he had been plucked from the kayak by the hand of God. Yet, deep down, both Ben and Chris could only imagine the horror of what their friend had endured.
Crocodiles have got the strongest jaw muscles of any animal that we know for their size. They've got about 66, sometimes 68 teeth in their jaws. They'll puncture through flesh, they'll go through shell, and they'll even go into bone.
Crocodiles kill their prey by dragging them down into the water and holding them there with their massively powerful jaws until they drown. It's likely that here, in the Congo basin that he loves so dearly, that's exactly what happened to Hendry. Either as quickly as a few seconds or as long as a few minutes, after which he was pulled into the water, he died. A stunned Ben and Chris would then race to the nearby village of Kabeya for help, only to find the villagers unwilling to help the strange men who emerged screaming out of the forest. After realizing that they had in fact lost someone to a crocodile attack, the villagers went out of their way to help. The two kayakers requested a boat to search for Hendry and at least recover his body, but they were met with a shocking revelation. Because Kabeya had lost so many people to the crocodile-infested waters, they in fact stopped traveling on it altogether. To them, the river was nothing more than a death trap. Mourning and at a loss for words, Ben and Chris called for help being extracted and temporarily put their expedition on hold. Hendry's lover, Juliana Burring, was tragically due to fly into Uganda with no return ticket and begin a life with him on New Year's. Needless to say, the loss of her future with him was absolutely crushing. In the wake of his death, Juliana, Ben, and Chris gathered to celebrate his life by lighting a funeral pyre in his honor.
Hendrik Coetzee was such a special individual and had so much to teach, both Chris and I along the way. And Chris and I learned so much from him.
Ben and Chris went on to finish the documentary film that they started with Hendry.
At the end of the day, what we did bring back and this film that Ben put together is just this perfect tribute. And it tells a lot of Hendry's story and shows that he was this amazing person.
Juliana went on to channel her grief into an impressive feat, circumnavigating the world solo on her bike in just 152 days. A peek at Hendry's journals, which have since been adapted into a book, suggests that this is exactly what he would want. I need to believe that there is magic out there. I cannot believe these things blindly though, and maybe that's why I have to do this mission, to prove to myself that we can do things which are bigger than ourselves. Dangling 16 feet above the hungry mouth of a crocodile. That's the final image that Jane has of her husband, David Hogbin. She desperately held on to his hand, trying with all of her might to pull her beloved partner to safety. But she too was starting to slip. When her husband said 4 simple words, she realized not only what he was about to do, but also what kind of a hero he truly was.
A man in his 40s has been pulled underwater by a crocodile in far north Queensland this afternoon.
We're really devastated with sadness for his wife Jane and their children and all of his family.
40-year-old David Hogbin had built an enviable life for himself, exploring the things that he enjoyed and finding success in nearly every avenue of life that he explored. Born and raised in Newcastle, New South Wales, he first began his career as a real estate agent and eventually transitioned into nuclear medicine. It was in 2014 that he graduated from the University of Notre Dame with a medical degree, allowing him to become a general practitioner. Though he loved helping people, the greatest love of his life was his family. In 2014, he married Jane, who also worked in the medical field. The two went on to have 3 sons who were just 7, 5, and 2 in 2024, which was the year the family embarked on their fateful road trip. David wanted to get away from the hustle and bustle of his job and the family's life in Newcastle just for a little bit. He and Jane decided that the best way to do so would be to do what they loved doing most, which was exploring the Australian countryside. So they embarked on the trip of a lifetime, a grand tour of Queensland alongside Jane's parents, her siblings, and of course the couple's children. Their journey took them four-wheeling, traversing back roads, and fishing in some of the most beautiful stretches of land in the world. They spent their nights beneath a canopy of stars and swapped stories around a crackling campfire. For the adventurous family, it was a dream come true. After all their hard work, they had 3 incredible sons, careers they could be proud of, and hobbies that they could all enjoy together. The most tragic part of this tale is that the family's love of the outdoors didn't eclipse the reality that the Australian continent is full of dangerous predators of all shapes and sizes. It's home to some of the most venomous snakes on Earth, like the inland taipan, as well as some of the most dangerous arachnids, like the Sydney funnel-web spider. But the Hogbins were well aware of this, and they reportedly took all the necessary precautions, in fact more so than many other people would even consider taking. On August 3rd, 2024, the family found themselves camping near Crocodile Bend on the beautiful Annan River near Cooktown. It shouldn't come as a surprise that this area is known for the largest number of crocodiles that lurk beneath the murky water. But the Hogbins were cautious. They specifically chose not to walk along the water's edge where a crocodile could lunge at them and potentially grab one of them. And they had good reason to give the saltwater crocodiles known to lurk the area a respectful amount of space. With 68 sharp teeth, which can reach up to 5 inches long, they're one of Australia's most dangerous predators. Though, the scariest part is that they don't use those teeth in the ways many people expect. A saltwater croc's teeth are made specifically for gripping prey, which they can do with a bite force of up to 2 tons. Many survivors remember not the pain of the teeth, but the overwhelming pressure of the bite.
And that noise will haunt me forever, I think, the snap of its jaw.
Actually, the shock is so great, you don't feel the cutting or anything like that. It just feels like a huge...
Not whatsoever. I mean, as soon as I came up, I honestly wondered, do I still have my leg?
When their prey is trapped in their powerful jaws, they then use the weight of their body and their mighty bite force to pull them underwater and drown them. This feared move is called the death roll, where a saltwater crocodile brings its prey underwater and rolls over and over, disorienting the helpless animal and tearing its flesh from its body into bite-sized pieces. The further away from the water you remain, the safer you are. But not even that is guaranteed. Saltwater crocodiles are known to lunge onto land in explosive shows of power, moving as fast as 11 kilometers per hour, which allows them to quickly grab their unsuspecting prey and retreat beneath the waves. Instead, they hiked on one of the most popular paths in the area, one that meanders high above the water, specifically 16 feet up, giving outdoor enthusiasts a clear view of the river without any of the danger. But on this day, there was a once-in-a-lifetime danger that no one could have expected. Hundreds of people walked this trail a week, but David happened to be walking it with Jane at the exact wrong time. A recent rainfall had deteriorated the cliffside, and as David walked, the ground beneath David's feet gave way. Jane, who was several feet behind him, heard him yelp. She sprinted to her husband's rescue and slid as far down the cliff face as she possibly could to grab his hand. However, the rain made the steep cliffs even more slippery and unstable than normal. As Jane tugged on her husband, desperate to help him over the ledge, her own feet began to give way. This was the moment when her husband of 10 years looked her in the eyes and said 4 words. "Stop, you're falling too." There was a moment of silence. Jane knew what was coming, but nothing could have prepared her for it. Dave let go of her hand and disappeared with a splash into the water below, making the split decision without any hesitation to let himself fall into the crocodile-infested water to save the love of his life and the mother of his children. Not even a minute after he hit the water, Jane would hear a scream. Her husband disappeared beneath the torrent of waves as a crocodile attacked him from below, dragging him beneath the water. It's likely that the splash from his fall attracted this crocodile, alerting him to an easy meal and causing him to launch an attack. Jane, like most Australians, knows that a crocodile drowns its prey before it dismembers and eats it, and all she could do at this point was call for help and pray that her husband had somehow beaten the odds. A massive team swept in to survey the river and riverside of any sign of David. Teams on boats, dive teams, and ATV teams scoured the area, until finally they found what they were looking for. Fellow campers and hikers in the area recounted seeing a massive crocodile with a distinct scar across its face. Doing their duty, wildlife rangers located the crocodile 2.5 miles away from where David Hogbin had disappeared. The massive crocodile, according to reports, weighed approximately 1,000 pounds and was 16 feet long. After 2 days of relentless searching, while David's family prayed that he was still alive, rangers got the sad confirmation that they needed. Inside the crocodile's stomach were the remains of David Hogbin. He was just 40 years old with a beautiful life ahead of him. You're probably familiar with the term death roll, that infamous technique that's used by crocodiles to dismember their prey since they of course can't chew. Now, in most cases, creatures unlucky enough to fall victim to this kill tactic, they don't live to tell the tale, of course. However, the person in this story, they experienced this nightmare not just once, not twice, but 3 times, and against all odds, made it out alive. This is the true story of Val Plumwood's deadly encounter with one of nature's most formidable predators, the saltwater crocodile. Kakadu National Park in Australia's Northern Territory is one of the most dangerous wetlands on Earth. It's a place where the land floods in the wet season and basically turns into this maze of billabongs, swamps, and hidden channels. It's a world ruled by several species of venomous snakes like the death adder, the taipan, feral pigs, wild buffalo, and of course, saltwater crocodiles. And on one fateful day in 1985, it was 47-year-old Val Plumwood who paddled into this world in nothing more than a canoe. Now Val, she was no stranger to nature, and she spent years challenging the very idea that us humans were separate or superior to the natural world. She fought to get mining banned in Kakadu, and during her stay was staying at the East Alligator Ranger Station where Ranger Greg Miles allowed her to use the park's canoe. That day, Greg asked Val to go out and take a look at some trails that he was looking to mark, some new trails. Now, he trusted her judgment, of course, because she was a very experienced bushwalker, and her advice really mattered and counted. So Val, she set out on this canoe, and she was going to go mark these trails for Greg Miles, the ranger. And the day, it started off pretty normal. It was hot, humid, and sticky. It was exactly what you'd expect in Kakadu during the wet season, and the water was calm, almost like glass. Val's paddling, she was paddling very easily, steadily, and for a while, she felt completely at peace out there. By the afternoon, the sky had shifted. What started as hazy blue turned into heavy, dark clouds, and insects, they started going quiet. The air felt heavier, and Val could sense that a storm was coming. She was deep in the park by this point, miles away from any help, and a part of her thought about turning back, but she still persevered and pushed forward, thinking this was all part of the experience, and that's when the rain came. Now at first it was just a few heavy drops, but within seconds it was pouring so hard she could barely see a few yards in front of her. The calm water that she was paddling in, it turned rough, the landmarks disappeared, and Val basically had to fight to keep her canoe steady because of the elements. So it was around this time that Val spotted it. Near the edge of the reeds, floating in the water, was a long dark shape. At first she thought it was just a log, nothing unusual, but then the log moved. It pulled away from the bank against the current, and that's when Val realized that this was no log. After all, crocodiles were a significant part of this ecosystem, and she also knew that they were evasive most of the time. They usually slip under the water long before you even get close or even notice them. But the energy with this one felt different. Even though it's an ambush predator, Val could basically sense that this crocodile was on the hunt. Trusting her intuition, Val started paddling even faster. While she's trying to feed herself all these positive thoughts and emotions, suddenly this crocodile, it resurfaces once again. She sees its head, and it was massive. And Val watched as its nostrils and eyes surfaced just above the water. They locked directly on her, And this crocodile was just staring at her. It didn't charge, it didn't thrash, it just floated there, watching her for a moment. And for a moment, it was actually the philosopher in Val that was fascinated by this. She was staring into the eyes of a predator that had been perfecting its craft and hunting skills for millions of years. Despite this fascination of her, that philosopher of hers quickly faded away though, because fear immediately crept up as she dug her paddle deep into the water, pulling as hard as she could. So for a while, this croc was just shadowing her. It kept the same distance, never rushing, never leaving her sight, but then it started to close in. As it pushed forward, Val could see the ridges along its back. Now it's looking like a horror movie. She could see the sheer size of this croc. Now, in desperation, she turned the canoe to face it head on, hoping the move might confuse or intimidate it. For a second, it seemed to work because the crocodile did hesitate. It sank lower into the water. However, its eyes were still locked on her. She could still see its eyes. And as soon as it went back under, it wasn't long after that, it actually exploded out of the water with such force that it shattered the canoe, forced Val to fall into the water. Her paddle was gone. She no longer has a canoe. And just like that, she was now fully at this crocodile's mercy. The water at this point swallowed her before she managed to swim to the surface, gasping, disoriented, only to see the croc's enormous head turning toward her. And before she could even try to swim away, the croc struck with such incredible speed, clamped its jaws down on her thigh with bone-crushing power. And this bite force is of course notoriously considered the strongest in the animal kingdom. And according to Val, the pain was like a white-hot flash that she was feeling during this time. This is when her world, as it was written in her writing, it was so eerie to read this, it began to spin. She later described this moment as the infamous death roll. She was in the midst of that, and over she was dragged under. The water was exploding in chaos. It was such a violent scene. Her chest burned. Her lungs were screaming for air. She could feel her leg tearing apart and its grip, the grinding, snapping of bone and tissue. But in the middle of that chaos, something unusual happened. Val recalled a strange, detached clarity. It was as if she was suddenly looking at herself from third person. According to her account, the animal proceeded to roll her again and again. The attack was so violent and powerful that Val felt her body break down a little more with each roll, and death was basically approaching with each roll. She knew her strength was fading, and she likely wasn't going to make it out of this situation alive. Now, right after death rolling her, this is when the croc began to drag her toward the bank. And Val knew exactly what this crocodile was doing at this point. She realized that it was pulling her to a spot where it could pin her body down and begin feeding on it, so just ripping off chunks. She was nearly unconscious at this point, drifting in and out from shock and from blood loss. But then, through the blur of water and pain, her eyes could catch a sliver of hope, a low paperbark tree with its branches just dipping into the water. The moment she saw this, Val knew that this was her only chance to get out of this alive. And just when this crocodile was beginning another roll, she would reach out with everything that she had towards this branch, and her fingers managed to close around that wet, rough bark, and she held on with everything that she had. Now the force had nearly tore her arm off from its socket, and as she's hanging on to this branch, she felt her mangled leg rip even further as the crocodile's spin met the resistance of this tree. It was like a gruesome tug-of-war for her, with her body as the rope. And then around this time, something shifted. The crocodile loosened its grip for just a fraction of a second. Now, whether it was startled by the resistance or simply the repositioning, this was all the time she really needed, and she struck at the opportunity to get out of this in one piece, or at least as close to it as possible. And so, with one desperate last pull, she tore her leg free from its jaws, and she was out. She was alive, but horribly injured, and she knew that she still had to get herself medical attention as soon as possible, otherwise things could get really bad as she's way out in the bush. So she managed at this point to drag herself onto the muddy bank. Her leg at this point was shredded, muscle and skin tore back all the way to the bone. She could see white splinters of her own leg exposed through her wounds. She was alive, but she knew this wasn't good. She was still deep in Kakadu, bleeding heavily, and the crocodile, not to mention, was somewhere out there still. So the next hours, they were pure survival. She began crawling, using her arms and her one good leg to drag herself through the mud, roots, and reeds. Every moment was agony. Sharp reeds, they cut at her skin as she was crawling through them. Insects swarmed to the smell of her blood. The heat pressed down on her. It was heavy and it was suffocating. She talked to herself constantly, however, and did anything that she could to stay awake, stay positive, and keep moving. She knew that if she did lose consciousness by any chance, she'd probably die right there. By late afternoon, Val was actually nearly gone. Her strength was fading, her vision was blurring. She really didn't think at this point that she was going to make it. And that's when, as if it was divine intervention, she would hear a sound that was unnatural. It was the low thrum of a boat engine. A desperate yet relieved Val at this point clawed forward, pulling herself toward it, and through a final patch of reeds, she broke into view of the river channel. That's where a park ranger in a small aluminum boat spotted her, and at first he couldn't believe what he was seeing. He thought he was watching a movie. He pulled ashore immediately, rushing to cover her with a blanket and called for an emergency evacuation. And now, according to reports and also Val's writing, she only remembers fragments of the incident after this. The helicopter blades, the paramedic faces, the antiseptic smell of the hospital, those are the kind of things that she could remember. But the main thing on her mind, she has survived the jaws and death rolls of a saltwater crocodile. Val's recovery was long and brutal. She went through multiple surgeries to repair the catastrophic damage to her leg, skin grafts, stitches, and treatments to fight off the infections that come with a crocodile bite. But according to Val, the hardest part was just really not the physical pain alone, but it was the transformation that the attack made on her internally. She had gone into Kakadu as a philosopher, someone who'd written for years about humanity's place in nature. But after this attack and after this incident, her words carried a kind of authority that they hadn't before. She spoke about the experience of being caught in a death roll as not only a violent assault that one can experience from a predator, but as a complete reorientation of perspective. She argued that us humans, our fear of being eaten, our terror of being reduced to prey, lies at the root of humanity's destructive relationship with the natural world. Val said the croc had stripped away every illusion of human superiority that she had, and I mean, she really never had any illusion of this. She was already really pro-equality when it came to animals and humans. But in those moments underwater, she was no longer separate from nature. She was a part of it, not above the food chain, not protected by her ideas, just another creature of flesh and blood. So it really gave her even more perspective on what she believed before. And the experience, as horrific as it was and as life-threatening as it was, it would basically serve as a turning point in her life and in her work. If you found this episode interesting, then our previous episode featuring the most brutal bear attack in Yellowstone history is likely to do the same. You can find it at the end screen of this video. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button. This is Animal Al. Be safe out there, and I'll see you in the next one.